Hello and welcome to this FMOD video. Today we will talk about multi-instruments, layering, the logic track, the compositional process for layering, as well as look at how I used white noise for this piece. If you look at the space just above the tracks, you'll see what's called the logic tracks. The information found here controls how the event plays out. The white flags you see here are destination markers. You can set the destination of a transition to one of these markers. The top blue flags are tempo markers. These tell FMOD what tempo and meter the piece is in. This is useful when making transitions that rely on beats or measures. The next blue flags are loop regions. Loop regions can be long or short, and you can also add transition timelines to them, but more on that in a second. The green flags indicate transition regions. I mentioned them in my last video, but I want to talk about transition timelines. When you double-click a transition, it will expand to show you what's called a transition timeline. Here we can dictate the length of the transition, how much overlap there is, adjust crossfades, and stop and start times. This is the same for loop markers and loop regions that have the transition timeline added to them. While each composer will have a different compositional process, I find that in the case of vertical layering, for me it is always easier to start with the base layer, the layer that will be played no matter what layer above it is triggered. For this piece, I first composed the base layer of the low section and some harmonic swells. Then I composed the flute melody, then I composed the brass swells. I used this same process for the light section. While this is not vital for multi-instrument layering, it is very useful when utilizing many vertical layers. There are a few differences to note between this piece and the previous video when it comes to multi-instruments. For the last piece, I used an asynchronous entry. This time, the triggered music had to sync up properly to the music already being played, thus the asynchronous button is off. The next difference is that the percent chance for each audio file to be played is set individually. For this multi-instrument, I have set the melodic instruments to have a lowered chance of being selected. The final aspect of this piece I want to look at is how I used white noise. White noise is valuable to a composer or sound designer when working in FMOD, as you can create a lot of different sounds, like rain, wind, underwater effects, explosions, and more. The first thing to note is that the single instrument for the white noise itself is set to loop, and will loop until the piece fades out or ends. You can adjust how long it will repeat for by clicking and dragging the end of the instrument. Instead of automation, this time I utilized LFO modulation to adjust the sound. To add LFO modulation, right-click on the property you'd like to affect, add modulation, then LFO modulation. The frequency is set to modulate a small amount based on a sine wave. This gives a back and forth or up and down pattern to the sound. The Q factor, on the other hand, is set to a more random pattern to give it a natural feel. I hope you enjoyed this FMOD video. Like, comment, and subscribe, and if you have any questions about this video or suggestions for future videos, leave them in the comments below.